President Trump's longtime bodyguard, Keith Schiller, told House Russia investigators that during Trump's 2013 trip to Moscow, a Russian offered to, quote, send 5 women to Trump's hotel room. Sources telling NBC News' Ken Dilanian, Schiller saw this offer as a joke and said, "We don't do that type of stuff." Now, Trump allies stress the denial offers another rebuttal to allegations in the dossier that Trump himself has raised.
It's all fake news. It's phony stuff. It didn't happen. It was a group of opponents that got together, sick people, and they put that crap together. Does anyone really believe that story? I'm also very much of a germaphobe, by the way.
Today, Schiller's lawyer also says these leaks about his new testimony are coming from, quote, partisan insiders from the House Russia probe. We have a panel, but I want to begin with a news report from NBC's Ken Dilanian. Ken, this denial essentially backs up Trump's previous claims, right?
It does, in a sense, Ari. And the reason Keith Schiller, his longtime bodyguard, was asked about this is because, as you said, this dossier written by the former British intelligence officer alleges that Donald Trump was cavorting with prostitutes at this hotel on this trip in 2013 in Moscow. So Keith Schiller tells a different story. He says that he was at a business meeting at lunchtime and a Russian participant in that meeting offered to send 5 women to Donald Trump's hotel room. Keith Schiller said he took that offer as a joke, but he also said he turned it down. And then later, he discussed it with Donald Trump as they were walking to Trump's room for Trump to go to bed, Schiller testified. He testified that he stood outside Donald Trump's door for a time and then went to bed himself. Now, Democrats drilled down on the idea that Schiller couldn't rule out or couldn't say what happened after he left Trump's hotel room. But Schiller's pretty adamant that what was described in the dossier didn't happen, Ari.
Right, and just briefly, Ken, you can have Democrats put up any type of theory about what may have happened in their imagined minds in a hotel room, but the new information we're getting here from this testimony is a person saying this stuff didn't happen.
That's right. A former NYPD detective, under oath to the House Intelligence Committee saying this didn't happen.
Let me bring in NBC National Security reporter Julia Ainsley, who's also been following the Russia probe, and a former Watergate special prosecutor, Nick Ackerman. Nick, prosecutors sometimes look at things more aggressively than others, but how do you view this development?
I mean, I view this as an absolutely dynamite development. To me, this confirms the Steele report and the dossier that this did happen. I mean,
how does it do that? How does it do that when you have a bodyguard saying no?
Because you've got a bodyguard who is a longtime loyalist who actually admitted that Trump was offered 5 women up to his hotel room. You have to ask yourself, why did he make that admission? From a prosecutor's standpoint, my guess would be he had to do it because other people who are honest, who are third parties, overheard that admission, overheard that statement. And so Keith Schiller had no choice but to admit to that unless he wanted to put himself into a perjury box. What he did is he pulled the old selective memory trick. Yeah, I remember what everybody else remembered about the offer, but I do know that when we went back to the hotel room, no one's ever going to be able to testify to that because it was just me, Donald Trump, and some Russians who are never going to testify to that. To me, this is extremely disturbing.
So I think what we want to look at here is why Trump had this offer in the first place. And when investigators are looking into this 2013 trip to Moscow, they want to know how the Russians may have already been cultivating Trump, someone that they could have compromise, what we would call blackmail over him, what they could be getting on him that they could hang over him later in exchange for influence. Of course, at this point, he wasn't a political influencer, but he was a very wealthy individual in the U.S. And so this will be of interest to congressional investigators and to the Mueller investigators who want to know how Russia was trying to pin Trump at this early period in time.
Do you want to give a scorecard? There's a lot of different reactions to your piece. Nick Ackerman here is giving a view, but the Daily Caller today, a conservative site, says no, this helps Trump. Do you want to get into that scorecard?
I wouldn't go so far as Nick went, but I think it's interesting and notable, certainly, that the idea of Russian women to Donald Trump's hotel room was raised. You really can't imagine that offer being made to Barack Obama or George W. Bush. I think that's why people are reacting to this. And as Julia said, there's a history of Russian compromise, particularly at this hotel, the Ritz-Carlton in Moscow. It's reputed to be wired for sound and video as a honey trap by the Russian intelligence services.